For the last 6 months, I have been living out of this backpack. So I just got done hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a 2,655 mile trail that goes from Mexico to Canada. And in this video, per your request, we're gonna go over everything that I brought with me. I did put out a gear video before I left, but this one's gonna be a little different because in addition to going over everything that I brought, I'm also gonna tell you about what changed, what I had to replace, what I added, things I sent home, so what worked, what didn't, and I'm gonna rate everything on a scale of 1 to 10. So if you're into backpacking or through hiking, or more specifically you want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, this is the video for you. Okay, first of all, my pack. I use the Hyperlite Windrider 55, and I replaced this 2 times, but not because anything was wrong with it. I love this pack. I've used it on hikes before, but I have a good relationship with Hyperlite. They sponsored me this year, so partway into my hike, they were coming out with an updated version of the pack. Mainly the main change was new and improved Dyneema material. So before it got launched, they sent me the new pack, which only came in white. I normally rock black, so that I could sort of test out the material, give them some feedback and first impressions. Then later into the hike, once it was actually launching, it came out in black, so they sent me a black one. So I used 3 of the exact same pack, basically. And like I said, there was nothing wrong with it, it's just the way it worked out. So a little bit irrelevant for this video. As far as the size goes, 55 liters, that was actually a little bit too big for my gear. Not in a problem way because it rolls down, but I just didn't need that much space for the majority of my hike. But the reason I chose to go with the 55 liter is because in the Sierra section, I was carrying a bear canister, and although you can just strap it to the top of the pack, I kind of wanted to put it inside. So the 55 liter allowed me to do that. So on a scale of 1 to 10, Hyperlite Windrider 55, a 10 for sure. Favorite pack. Since we're talking about the pack, I'm going to talk about some of the accessories kind of that I have on the outside of my pack. So I have the Hyperlite shoulder pouch, which attaches to the shoulder strap, and I keep in there my phone and my sunglasses. Love this because it keeps my phone like really accessible, especially where I'm taking pictures and doing video all day. And then the front pouch is where I keep my sunglasses, and although they're like cheap sunglasses, I never broke them the whole trip. So shoulder pouch, 10 out of 10. On my other shoulder strap, I have the Hyperlite bottle pocket. This was new for me. I added it right before I left. Previously, I'd used like a carabiner attachment thing to keep my water bottle, so I like the bottle pocket better. It was a little easier to access. It's nice to not have to like reach into your side pockets. It's just right there. So yeah, convenient, no problems with it, 10 out of 10. I also kept on my shoulder strap the Garmin InReach Mini. This was my first time using it. It's kind of like an emergency device. You could get a rescue using that. You can also use satellite to text people. I think there's more that you can do with it as far as navigation, but I didn't utilize it that way because I didn't know how. So yeah, it worked out really well. I was able to text Luke every night, and then I was also able to communicate with other people on trail that I was hiking with that also had Garmin. If you're planning to go to a certain campsite that night, but something happens, you can actually like communicate where you ended up. Or like me and Indy ended up ahead of Jackson in the Sierra one day, and so we had like a crazy river crossing that we figured out where was the best place to cross. So we were able to text Jackson some directions for that. So that came in really handy. And then also for fire info. Once I was up in Northern California and Washington, if there were nearby fires and I didn't have phone service, I was able to text a number and get like relevant fire info near me. So yeah, the Garmin worked great, 10 out of 10. Shelter system, I use the Hyperlite Mid 1. I've used it before, love this tent. It's a single wall, 1-person tent. It uses 6 tent stakes, plus I have an extra just in case. And it uses 1 trekking pole to set it up. I did replace the tent once in the middle of the hike. The zipper broke, didn't exactly break, but it was just being finicky and getting stuck and not working properly. Honestly, I probably could have fixed it by cleaning it out, using some pliers, I'm not sure. I'm just not really that innovative. That's probably not the word I want, but because again, I have a good relationship with Hyperlet, I reached out to them having issues with the zipper. They sent me a new one. So I started with a white one, but they sent me a green one to replace it because that's all that was in stock at the moment. So I finished the trail with that. I just want to say about the zipper though, I'd used that tent for 1,000 miles previously, more than that, and never had an issue. And in addition, I met a lot of people on the PCT with all different brands of tents that were having zipper issues. That is just a common problem on the PCT, I think, because you've got a lot of that like really fine powdery dirt that just gets in there or something. I don't know. And so like even at trail days, other brands of gear, which I won't name, were like that's all they were doing all day is fixing zippers on people's tents. So that's just like a common issue and I don't think is specific to the mid one. So that's all I want to say about that. The tent stakes I brought, I used to use hook stakes, but right before the trail I decided to switch out to like the, I don't know what they're called, but other kind of stakes, and I'm glad I did that. I feel like those like stuck in the dirt a lot better. And trekking poles. So I started the trail with the Durston Iceline trekking poles, which I didn't realize when I first bought them, but are actually too short to set up the mid one. So right before I left, I was able to grab like a pole extender from Hyperlite to just make the trekking pole a little bit taller, and so that worked fine. Later in the trail though, I did switch trekking poles. So the Durston poles, the Iceline poles, I love. They're sick. They're so lightweight, and I love how there's not two adjustable pieces. One clicks in and the other piece adjusts, which just makes things simpler. You can buy them without the straps, which is cool, with or without the straps, but I don't use the straps. So yeah, I really liked the poles, but I think because they're so lightweight, you're sacrificing some durability. And so I broke down the tips once or twice, and then in the Sierra I actually like snapped the pole in half. Which that was like a crazy situation. I was in snow, there was 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts. I jammed the trekking poles into the snow and was like literally my entire body weight like holding myself onto the mountain by the poles, and so one of the times that I did that, I snapped one. That's not a normal situation that you would encounter, I don't think. So no shade on the poles. And Durston Gear was like really great about replacing those pieces for me as I went. But that time that I snapped them, since I didn't have an actual pole and I didn't have time to like wait for them to come in the mail, I decided to just grab some new poles in the town of Bishop. So I got the Black Diamond Trail Cork trekking poles, which I actually have that exact pair at home. So I've used them, knew they worked good, whatever. They're like at least twice the weight probably, but I ended up finishing the trail with those, and they're also tall enough to set up the mid one, so I didn't need the extending piece anymore, so I sent that home. So shelter, I want to give it a 10 out of 10 because I love that shelter, but we're going to give it a 9 out of 10 just because the zipper problem. Tent stakes, 10 out of 10. Trekking poles, the Durston ones, I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. I wonder what the lowest score I'm going to give on this whole video is. 8 out of 10, and then trail cork poles, I don't know, 9 out of 10. Sleep system. My sleeping bag, I used a Kuyu 15-degree mummy bag. Most people go with quilts these days, but I love a mummy bag. I sleep cold, so I like to be able to like pull the hood all the way over if I want. If I'm not using the hood, I just stuff my clothes in it and then it's my pillow. I love a mummy bag. 15 degrees is definitely a little bit of a lower rating than a lot of people use on the PCT, but I don't regret that at all. We had some nights in the 20s, maybe teens in the Sierra. So yeah, I love the bag, but I did get some little holes in it from the zipper catching on it, which is probably a common issue. So you get some of the down feathers coming out of it. And then even the seams of the bag, sometimes the down feathers would like start to come out of it. So I don't feel like that's a pretty expensive bag. I don't feel like, I'm not gonna say I don't feel like it was worth it. I do like the bag, I'll continue to use it, but I feel like it's losing down feathers faster than it should for how expensive it was. But the weight to warmth ratio was really good, that's why I picked it. It also comes in like a charcoal gray black, which is also why I picked it. And so yeah, we're gonna give that a 7 out of 10. I also used a liner with my sleeping bag, which I do for 3 reasons. It gives a little bit more warmth. Most of them add like 10 degrees warmth. It also helps keep my bag clean, so I usually sleep in the liner, that way my bag's not getting gross, because the down sleeping bags you're not able to wash easily. You should be using like a special down detergent to wash them. So I didn't wash my bag the whole trail. I would just wash the liner. The liner also doubles as a laundry bag in town, so that's convenient. And then sometimes when it was warmer out, I like to just sleep in the liner and have the bag like on top of me or not at all, and then I'm still like in something. So I love having a liner. I started with a Cocoon silk liner. Those are super lightweight, which is great, but they do eventually fall apart, especially if you're somebody who tosses and turns like I do sometimes. So at some point, mine got kind of shredded and then I had to replace it. I wasn't able to get the same one, but at REI I grabbed, I think it was still Cocoon, but just like a heavier, I don't even know, it wasn't cotton, but like some type of polyester. So it was much heavier and a little bit warmer. Neither one was ideal, I guess. We'll rate those like a 6 out of 10. Sleeping pad, I use the Thermarest Neo Air X Lite. I have used this pad since the AT. I've replaced it once in the last 8 years, so this one I've had for a very long time, and 10 out of 10. I had no issues, no pinholes, no leaking, no nothing. I feel like everyone I met on the whole PCT had issues with pads deflating overnight and trying to find the holes and patch them or replace them, and I don't know, I never had that issue. A lot of the people that were having issues were using other brands of pads, but some of them were Thermarest as well, so I think I'm just gentle with my gear. Shoes. So for the PCT, I went with the Ultra Lone Peak 9s trail runners. This was my first time using them. I went through 4 pairs of those, which is pretty normal, I would say. They were comfortable. I barely ever got blisters or had any feet problems. If you're not familiar, they're zero drop, wide toe box, a pretty popular option for through hiking. Overall, all good things to say, but I think Ultras compared to other brands of shoes that I've worn in the past, they just like that like midsole or something breaks down really quickly, and so it feels like a huge difference. A new pair of shoes versus even 100 to 200 miles in, it's just like everything feels a lot harder on your feet. The first pair I wore to 700 miles, which is pretty crazy. The rest of them I wore like maybe 500 miles per pair. It's a good option. I'm gonna say 8 out of 10. I ended up deciding to send myself my boots, my Salomon hiking boots for the Sierra section, which I wasn't sure if I was going to do that originally. The main reason I decided to was because my micro spikes didn't feel like they were fitting great on my trail runners, like they kept sliding over and I would have to fix them. Normally I use my spikes on my boots at home when I do winter hiking. So I was like, I don't want to spend the whole Sierra like having to fix my micro spikes the whole time. I probably just needed slightly smaller ones, but anyways, I decided to send myself my boots because they fit on those perfectly. And the boots might have been a mistake. I've had the boots for a long time and I love these boots, but they're waterproof. And for through hiking, waterproof really just isn't the best option. Because even though they're waterproof, they're eventually going to get wet inside. Whether there's a saturation point eventually, or you got snow coming in like the top of the boot, they're just going to get wet inside and then they don't freaking dry. And then in the Sierra, it was so cold overnight especially that they could freeze. If they're wet inside, now they're frozen. So that was all just, yeah, I dealt with cold, wet, frozen feet for a lot of the Sierra and it was miserable. There were times we had river crossings where there was just nowhere good to cross. You just had to ford it or walk through it, and I constantly had to take off my boots. Other people would just like leave on their trail runners. I mean, they're kind of wet anyway, but they're gonna dry out faster. I don't think the pros outweighed the cons of having boots in the Sierra. They would stay drier longer than trail runners on the inside, but once they got wet, that was the end. So boots for this scenario, 3 out of 10. And then I also brought a camp shoe, Crocs. That's been part of my kit and my routine for many years. I'm a huge fan of having camp shoes at night. I've tried like other types of like sandals and stuff, but I feel like it's annoying getting in and out of your tent to pee or whatever, and you got like Velcro to deal with. Like Crocs are just so easy to slip on and off. Love them. Also use them on tons of river crossings. I even hiked with them a bit in the Sierra because if I was changing into Crocs to cross a river and I knew there was another river crossing coming up, I just stayed in Crocs. So I was like hiking in snow at one point, like post-holing in my Crocs. Not ideal for that, but yeah, 10 out of 10. Love having Crocs. Clothing. Okay, I have Under Armour shorts. Those eventually from all of the like, what do you call it? Glissading. Some of the seams started to undo, so I tried to replace them at one point, but they were too small, so I went back to the old ones and just sewed them, hand sewed them myself. Love those shorts. I've worn versions of those shorts on all my hikes. So yeah, mostly they held up good. We'll go 8 out of 10. T-shirts, I would wear one and then have an extra clean one, and then usually my system was I'd wear one shirt like that whole stretch from town to town. Once I got to town, I'd shower, put on my clean one, and then wash the dirty one. In the past, I've used Under Armour shirts, but I couldn't find the exact ones I wanted, so I ended up with these like cheap, just black t-shirts from Amazon. They were fine. I did replace them 2 or 3 times along the trail. Everything just gets like gross, and so they were cheap enough. I just bought some new ones. 8 out of 10. My socks, I wear the Darn Tough Paul Bunyan high socks. Everyone always asks if they're for compression. Not specifically, I just like the look. They're full cushion, so I feel like that's really helpful for not getting blisters. I've used them before. Love these socks. 10 out of 10. I did replace them twice. I carried 2 pairs, and then I think I replaced them at least once or twice because they never got holes or anything, but as they just get used more and more, they kind of compress down more and more and aren't quite as like thick cushion anymore. So I just proactively replaced them. I added waterproof socks when I was in the Sierra. I thought that would help solve the problem with the wet boots issue. At times they did help a little bit, but kind of like having a waterproof boot. Like at some point they just have a saturation point, I guess. So I don't really feel like that was worth it. And then there were a couple times where things got really wet inside, and it's like because they're waterproof, the socks would almost like fill up inside your shoe as like a balloon and like hold the water in there. And then I feel like they were weird to wash, like laundry detergent didn't get fully rinsed out, so it was like sudsy inside at one point. I got a little rash on the top of my toes at one point. I ended up tossing them after the Sierra. And I feel like, I don't know, my personal experience for this situation of thru hiking, 2 out of 10. I wouldn't do it again. For extra layers, I started off with my -33 merino wool turtleneck base layer. Love it, super comfortable. I did end up sending that home at some point, maybe after the Sierra, when I just didn't feel like I needed so many layers anymore. So yeah, 9 out of 10. Pretty much glad I brought it, but wasn't like a super necessary component maybe. I also had the Kuyu hooded fleece. Loved that. That's what I kept as kind of like my mid layer throughout the whole trail. Super lightweight, pretty warm for the warmth to weight ratio, and just really comfortable. 10 out of 10. I brought my Mountain Hardwear puffy hooded jacket. 10 out of 10. I've used this before. Love it. Don't really hike with it 99.9% of the time. It's just kind of for at camp. It's what you want to keep dry in your pack. That way when you're cold, wet, whatever, you have something warm and dry to change into. I brought my Black Diamond rain jacket. Rain jackets, kind of like the waterproof boots. They're great when it's like a little bit of rain, but eventually, in my experience, most rain jackets still have a saturation point. And so I love having a rain jacket as an additional layer, kind of like a windbreaker. Like in dry conditions, it can really keep you so warm. I always have it on the outside of my pack, so I just throw that on when it's a little bit chilly out. Love the rain jacket. Love that it's got the waterproof zipper instead of the Velcro flap. It's got an extra large hood, which is really great to stuff all this hair inside. But when it really rained, I did still get wet. So we'll give that a 7 out of 10. Rain pants. I brought Marmot rain pants. I bring those not so much for rain, because I don't really care if my legs get wet, but more for an extra warm layer. So in the Sierra, I use them a ton because we would start early in the morning in the dark, it's cold, so I'd start with my rain pants on. But then later morning, as the sun came out and conditions warmed up, I was able to just take the rain pants off over my boots, which I love being able to do that. Like a base layer pant or something, you'd have to like take off your shoes to take those off. So having those rain pants was really important to me. Mine did get a bit shredded from my micro spikes. Like my micro spikes would catch on them and then they tore, and so somebody sewed them for me at some point. I don't know that it would have mattered what brand of rain pants that I had, but that was just like one issue that I had. After the Sierra, I found myself not needing to use them at all. I was just wearing them to like do laundry, so that's a little bit much and heavy to be doing laundry in, so I eventually sent those home and just got myself a pair of like light little sleep shorts, laundry shorts, whatever, just a second pair of shorts that I could wear when I was washing my hiking shorts. I also didn't start with, but very quickly added a pair of base layer pants. So like I said, I don't like base layer pants for a hiking layer because I feel like you can't take them on and off easily. I prefer the rain pants, but there were some cold nights that in the beginning I tried to sleep in my rain pants and that was not working. It wasn't comfortable and you'd get all like sweaty and wet legs. So very early on I grabbed a pair of base layer pants. I did wear them here and there at night, overnight when it was cold, and I was glad that I had them, but I didn't wear them often. Like especially towards the end of the trail, I barely wore them at all. So I don't know, 5 out of 10, like I think it's not totally necessary, but it was nice at times. And the last thing to know about clothing is I did not carry a sun hoodie, and a lot of you asked about that. It is very common to carry a sun hoodie on the PCT so that your arms are fully covered and most of your hands, and you get the hood to cover the back of your neck. I didn't do that. I just had my normal hiking t-shirt on, and then I would wear sunblock on my arms and face. My hair covers my head fine, and yeah, I just didn't think a sun hoodie was necessary. I also really don't like the heat, so the idea of having more fabric on me just did not sound appealing. But I also started fairly early season and did not have like extreme desert heat conditions either, so I felt like sunblock was fine for the most part. But as confidently as I say that, I also should mention like most people on trail carried a sun hoodie, especially guys, I feel like, to be able to cover the back of your neck. So do what you want with that information. And all of my clothing and extra layers I keep in a Hyperlite pod, which perfectly fits the inside shape of the pack. It's got a nice zipper opening, so it's just really easy to find what I need when I need it. Food and water systems. So the majority of the trail, I carry the Hyperlite food bag, which comes with the rock bag and the line. Love this whole kit setup. The food bag has like a magnetic closure, which is cool. But the rock bag and line, I ended up not hanging a bear bag pretty much the entire trail. I hung it once, which I feel like ashamed to admit, but in the beginning you're in the desert, there's not really bears. There's a few isolated sections that maybe could have bears, but you get real used to sleeping with your food. Then in the Sierra, you're required to have a bear canister, which we'll talk about, so you don't have to hang through that whole section. And then after the Sierra, once I sent the bear can home, for a while anyway, it seemed like there were never any good trees or branches to hang your food. And then just got used to sleeping with my food again, and yeah, I maybe saw one bear bag that was hung the whole trail, and like I said, I only hung mine once on the whole trail. So I carried the rock bag and line for pretty much no reason. But I'm not sorry that I had it. Like that one time I did hang, there were some comments about bears in that area, and I had a good tree to do it on, and I was glad, and I did it. I slept better because of that. I think I just strongly feel that you should at least have the ability to hang a food bag. Whether you do or not is your prerogative. So anyways, that's my random opinion. We're gonna give the food bag a 10 out of 10. I carried a titanium spork. I think it was Jolly brought up in conversation once though how a spork is just like not necessary. Like you really don't need, like the fork part of it doesn't really do jack shit. And he's right. The more I thought about it, like it's so hard to get like the bottom of the peanut butter or Nutella out with a spork. Like a spoon is actually more convenient for that. So because of that, we're gonna go 5 out of 10. Like, just get a spoon. I did not carry a stove, pot, or fuel on this hike because I went stoveless. So I'm gonna do another whole video about food and pros and cons of going stoveless because a lot of you guys were curious about that. But for this video, I'm just gonna rate going stoveless 10 out of 10 for me. For water, I used the Sawyer Squeeze water filter, which is pretty common amongst most through hikers. I replaced the filter twice on the trail. Once because you're not supposed to let them ever freeze because it could crack the inside and you wouldn't know it, and then it's not working properly. There was one night where I thought I didn't put it in my sleeping bag. It was like the first night that I had that was below freezing temperatures and I just didn't think of it. And so I wasn't sure if it was working properly or not, so I just replaced it. And then the second time later on the trail when I replaced it, it was just because it was like working really slow and I was having to use a lot of arm muscle to filter. You can backwash the filters, and I do that. Not as much as I should, but on occasion, because they do get a little bit clogged up and slow over time depending on the water sources you're filtering from. So yeah, I backwashed mine a few times, but it just got really slow and I eventually replaced it. But yeah, they work great. I don't know, 8 out of 10. I carried 3 smart water bottles in various sizes. I don't have many comments about that. 10 out of 10. I also carried a CNOC water bladder, although I saw a video recently where they pronounced it like Knock or something. I don't even know how you pronounce it, but I've carried it. I call it a CNOC bladder forever. They're amazing. They do not pop. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Although I did get one pinhole in it this time, so I had to replace that once. But I've never had to replace it before, and I've used them since the AT. So we're gonna go 9 out of 10. Love, love, love them. Just didn't have to replace it. Typically on the trail, I had the capacity to carry up to 6 liters. 3 liter CNOC bladder and like 3 liters in smart water bottles. I think in the desert, they say you should plan to be able to carry around that much, but I was, again, earlier season, water sources weren't as much of an issue, it wasn't as hot, so I don't know that I ever really carried more than 3 liters. And when I carried 3 liters, it was usually just because I was gonna be dry camping that night. So no regrets on having a 6-liter capacity, but also probably wasn't necessary. Toiletries. I'm not gonna rate every single item individually. We'll just do that as like a cohesive unit at the end. So I'll just run through all the stuff that I brought and any like noteworthy comments. Toothbrush and toothpaste. No comment. A little Dr. Bronner soap. I actually didn't use this as much as I normally do on trail, but I did end up using it in town. Sometimes when there wasn't laundry and I needed to just like wash stuff in the shower or in the sink. Wet wipes. Toilet paper and trowel, a backcountry bidet. That is to try to not be using so much toilet paper. I use a Diva cup, nail clippers, little tweezers, a disposable razor. I usually carry some Q-tips, which is kind of a luxury. Earplugs, which I really only use like once or twice. A little bit of floss. I carried some laundry detergent strips and dryer sheets. The laundry detergent strips I probably wouldn't do again. Most places that had laundry had detergent easily accessible. And when I didn't have laundry accessible and had to do it in the shower, the strips just did not work for that. Dryer sheets though, pretty much nowhere has dryer sheets, so I didn't mind having those on me. I also carried sunblock at times early on in the trail, and maybe we'll throw bug spray in here. I carried bug spray at times, but not the whole trail. I also carried Aquaphor, which maybe could go into the first aid category, but I used Aquaphor at times when my lips got like sunburnt or chapped, or I had a little bit of chafing issues. And all my toiletries I keep in a 2-liter Zippy from Hyperlite, which I love. It's got the zip across the top opening, and that makes it super convenient to find all those little things. So overall, toiletries, I pretty much started and finished with the same stuff. So yeah, I would rate my system for me a 10 out of 10. I guess from there I'll go into first aid because that's kind of a similar category. So in my little first aid kit, I've got like triple antibiotic, like single serving, single-use packets, and a couple of those alcohol wipes, same thing, a few Band-Aids, an extra like spare mini lighter, a fire starter, some gear repair tape, a couple pre-cut strips of blister tape, Benadryl and Zyrtec, and Tylenol. Got a lot of comments about the Tylenol thing. Just FYI, I use Tylenol instead of ibuprofen because I only have one kidney, but most people would opt for ibuprofen because that actually helps with swelling or whatever. Needle and thread, duct tape, which I keep on my trekking poles, an emergency poncho, and toe warmers. I think that's everything. Most of that stuff I never used. The extra lighter, the fire starters, the triple antibiotic, alcohol, band-aids, none of that. I think I used the blister tape, KT tape, like 1 or 2 times. The gear repair tape I used a couple of times. I lent some to other people a few times, and I used it on my sleeping bag, the little holes I got from getting it caught in the zipper. The needle and thread I did actually use to sew my shorts. The emergency poncho I almost didn't use, but finally used it once at the end. That really is nice because, like I said, the rain jackets do have a saturation point, so if it's a really cold, wet day, the emergency poncho is like, comes in clutch on top of a rain jacket, and it just helps keep you warmer. They're just not great for reusing. It becomes very bulky and wet and doesn't dry and whatever. And then I did also use my toe warmers, although that was a bad idea. I like to have those just as an extra, just in case I was in like an emergency situation. I'm gonna get frostbite on my feet. I don't know, I've always carried them for that, but almost never used them. But this trail, I did use them on Mount Whitney. Started in the morning with frozen, wet, cold boots, and I, within the first few miles, like could not think about anything else other than how cold my feet were. And so I ended up stopping and putting the toe warmers in. But I put on 2 pairs of socks that morning. I had my normal socks and my waterproof socks over them, and the boots were already like too tight, which I think was making my feet colder. And then I stick the freaking toe warmers in there. I couldn't feel my feet, so I don't know, it didn't really seem like they were working, but I figured they must be working. I've used toe warmers plenty on like snowboarding and stuff, so I figured they must be helping prevent my feet from getting frostbite, right? Well, later in the day when I took them off, they were like rock solid. Like, I honestly don't even know that they worked at all. Like, I feel like they froze. And then that is how I ended up losing my toenails. So because of that, I think on the left side, the toe warmer, I put like too far forward on my toe. By like later that night or the next day, my toenail started to turn like yellow, and it was like really wiggly. I thought it was gonna fall off then, and it didn't. But a couple months later, then there was one day where I stubbed my toe like multiple times that day, and the toenail ended up falling off. I honestly probably still will carry toe warmers in the future, but if I could go back, I probably wouldn't have used them in that scenario. And although I didn't use a lot of stuff in my first aid kit, I still feel like some of that stuff is necessary to have. Triple antibiotic, alcohol wipes, like those are good things to have. I did get some scrapes and cuts sometimes, but just nothing serious enough that I felt I needed to use those things. But I don't think I would really change anything in my first aid kit, other than maybe I don't really need a fire starter, I don't know. I also did sprain my ankle on trail, and I did not have any type of like wrap or anything, or enough KT tape. I just had the little strips. I didn't have enough like tape to like tape it or anything, which a lot of people had some things to say about. So it's one of those things, when you've hiked thousands of miles, you tend to whittle down your kit to the bare bones, because if you've hiked thousands of miles and never needed to use certain things, it just kind of seems pointless to bring it. Now, after having sprained my ankle, will I hike with a wrap? Probably not, to be honest. But I'm not going to tell you not to bring one. I don't know, it's all up to like what you think you might need and your comfort level of what you think you can survive without when the time comes. So I'm gonna give my first aid kit a 9 out of 10. Electronics. I carried the Nightcore headlamp. This was my first hike with that headlamp. Great, 10 out of 10. Holds a charge really good, super lightweight, nice and bright. no issues. I was gonna carry, in my original gear video, I said 2 20,000 Anchor battery packs, and at the last minute, I got concerned that that wasn't enough, and so I actually brought 3 20,000 Anchor battery packs, which is nuts. Most people would not need that much battery. A lot of people I know only carried like a single 10,000. But because of all the videoing and editing that I do, I did need more battery than the average person. I was glad I had the 320s. I needed the 320s whenever I did like a 6+ day stretch. But those were few and far in between. Oftentimes we were only going like 3 to 5 days. I probably didn't need 320s, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. We'll call that my luxury item. So I've always used Anchor. I don't have much to compare to as far as like weight ratio to like amount of battery, because I know like Nightcore makes batteries, and then you also have the price difference on them. I don't know what to tell you. I've always used Anchors, but I like my system. It is heavy, but to me, totally worth it. So we're gonna say 10 out of 10. I bought before the trail a 100-watt charging block and 100-watt charging cords because the battery packs take a while to charge in town, and when you don't have a lot of time, I thought that the 100-watt system would help charge things faster. But that block is heavy, the cords are heavier, and honestly, I don't know that that was worth it, because in theory, yes, it should all charge faster, but oftentimes, like you're staying at hostels, or sometimes we're camping in town or whatever, where there's a million people fighting for the same outlet. So a lot of these places have like power strips that you've got 15 different people charging from a single power strip. And so I don't think the 100-watt block and cords is doing anything in that scenario, because there's just not that much power coming through. I'm not a fucking electrician, I don't know, but I don't really feel like it was a noticeable difference that anything was charging faster. Although with normal outlet situations, maybe in theory it was, I don't know. Anyways, I'm gonna say freaking 6 out of 10. I'm not sure that that was a worth it purchase. I also brought headphones. I just brought the normal ones with the wire because I do so much editing. I didn't want to have to worry about like AirPods charging, keeping those charged as well. I think a lot of people do the AirPods because if you're listening to something while hiking, the cord situation is kind of annoying. So for me, that system, I don't know, 8 out of 10. I keep all those electronics in another 2-liter zippy. Once again, 10 out of 10. And then also, I guess I'll throw in this category, I carried a little mini tripod that I would keep on my chest strap. It's just a cheapy one from Amazon, and it broke twice. I had to replace it, I think. But I've used that one before. It's cheap enough. I just bought a new one. It is what it is. I do really like that tripod, and I didn't even mind replacing it money-wise because it's so cheap, but it's more just the inconvenience of trying to like Amazon something to these tiny little mountain towns, and it might take 7-8 days to get there, and you're trying to time it right. Like, that's a pain in the butt. But anyways, I do like the tripod, so we'll give that a 7 out of 10. And lastly, we'll go over the special gear that I had during the Sierra section. So I already kind of mentioned you needed a Bear canister in that section, so I went with the Bear Vault 475. Most people use the Bear Vault 500, slightly bigger. The longest stretches I did were 6 days. I could not fit 6 full days of food in the 475, but the people that I were hiking with could not fit 6 whole days of food in the 500 either. So what we were able to do is figure out, like, on a 6-day stretch, our first night being somewhere to camp where there was a bear box. So it didn't technically matter if everything fit in the canister that first night. So you've eaten your first day of food, and now on the second day of food, you're eating the second whole day of food, and then everything needs to fit in your can that night, which now is just 4 days of food. So that worked out fine. I think the 475, like, I'm a smaller person than, you know, Indy, who's, I don't know, 6 feet or whatever, and consuming more food. So the 475 was fine for me with the amount of food I was eating. Maybe it won't work for everybody. But because I had the slightly smaller version, it fit into my pack horizontally, which worked out really well. I think if I had the 500, it wouldn't have quite fit in that way. I would have had to have it vertically, and then it would have been a little bit harder to pack my pack, or I would have had to have it on top. There are different versions of bear cans out there. I haven't used anything different, but this one worked fine. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. The way it locks, sometimes it's a little bit hard to undo, especially in the morning when everything is cold and your hands are cold. But I feel like there's other canisters that have like a special key for it, and I don't know. It was fine. It wasn't a problem. Well, the problem is just it's big and bulky and a pain in the ass and it's heavy as shit. So I'm not giving it a 10 out of 10 just because I don't like having a bear can. We're gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Micro spikes. I've used the same micro spikes for years, the Cthulhu, whatever, micro spikes. Not much to say about it. I feel like that's kind of like the go-to brand for most people. Because I entered the Sierra so early, there were definitely situations that would have been much safer to have crampons. But I don't own crampons. Nobody out there is wearing like your normal big mountaineering crampons because you got mountaineering boots. Like that's just not practical for a PCT thru hike, I don't think. I've since learned, I think there's kind of in-between version crampons that are maybe not quite as mountaineering boot style, but like that could go onto a normal shoe. I don't know. I'd have to look into that more. But that might have been the solution, because although the micro spikes worked great 90% of the time, there were a few situations like when we did Mount Whitney and stuff that micro spikes just, I was not confident that that was going to help keep me attached to the mountain. So in general, love the spikes, 10 out of 10, but in this specific scenario going into the Sierra at the beginning of May, we're going to go 7 out of 10. Also should mention, so many people have been like, oh, snowshoes, you should have had snowshoes, or wondering if I wished I had snowshoes. I don't. I'm not super experienced with snowshoes, but I just think that some of the time it would have been nice, but the majority of time it wouldn't have been necessary. And then you're just like carrying these big, bulky, heavy snowshoes all the time when you're only, and taking them on and off for the bits and pieces that it just would have, I don't regret not having snowshoes. I also got bigger mittens for the Sierra section, so I don't even know if I mentioned, I had small smart wool, like kind of like liner gloves for practically the whole trail, but they're not like big waterproof ones or anything. So I added, in addition to that, in the Sierra, like bigger mittens to go over the gloves. So that was kind of a nice system, because when it was just a little bit cold, you could have the liner gloves and I could have the big ones like hanging off my wrist, and then wear those when it was more necessary. Like, I'm glad I had the option to wear both of them together or one or the other. And then I just sent the mittens home after the Sierra. And then lastly, I had an ice axe in the Sierra. So I hadn't really used an ice axe much before. Luke bought me this one for Christmas before doing the trail, knowing that I was going to need one. And in hindsight, as it turns out, it was a little bit too short of a handle. I think if you go buy an ice axe, they have you measure it a certain way, maybe like holding it down by your side and it's supposed to fall to your ankle or something. I'm not sure exactly. But mine was a little bit short for me. And come to find out, in the Sierra, like sometimes you're using the handle almost like a trekking pole on like the, if it's sloped like on the high side or something. And I would have to be like crouched over to do that because it was too short. If I do more mountaineering stuff, I'll probably buy a longer one. So 8 out of 10. So that was my comprehensive look at all the gear that I brought on the Pacific Crest Trail. And one of the big questions I kept getting was, what was my base weight? So base weight is the weight of your pack and all of your gear, including everything except food and water, basically. So my base weight was about 16 pounds, although that did fluctuate throughout the trail because obviously with the extra gear in the Sierras or things I like changed or sent home or added, that changed a little bit, but mostly about 16 pounds, which means that with food and water, it fluctuated. Like, I would say on average, I was probably hiking with between 20 to 30 pounds with food and water, but occasionally more than that. When I entered the Sierra, I weighed my pack with 6 days of food and 2 liters of water, I think, and I was at 40 pounds. That was probably the heaviest I was on the whole trail. But that's pretty crazy, starting with a 16-pound base weight and then being 40 pounds in the Sierra. Didn't enjoy that. So yeah, I'm a pretty average, I would say, to good base weight. Certainly not ultralight, which is sub 10 pounds, but I don't think I would do anything differently. I had some extra clothing that maybe I could have gotten away without some of those things, or I could have gotten a warmer degree sleeping bag, especially like after the Sierra, but for the most part, I was really glad with everything that I had. And so as always with gear, I don't think there's like right or wrong gear or right or wrong amount of things to bring. It's just like your personal preference. What is valuable to you to have? What can you live without? How much money do you want to spend on ultralight gear? Things like that. So I hope from this video, if you're planning to hike the PCT, you take away like things that you might need or want on the PCT versus other trails. Or if you have a piece of gear that's not working for you, maybe some specific brand of gear that I had might be a good recommendation. So yeah, just take what you want from this. I'm not a professional, or am I kind of a professional these days? I'm not really a professional. I don't look at myself as a professional, and I definitely don't have the lightest weight kit out there, but this is what I do. It works for me, and I hope you got something out of it. So like I said, I'm gonna probably do a video about the food stuff next, all about going stoveless, pros and cons, types of food I ate, resupplies, all that good stuff. I'll see you then.